Bodybuilding has to this point been dominated by dynasties or eras. It is impossible to sum up the sport's history with a series of names: Arnold, Haney, Yates, Coleman, Cutler, Heath. But one amazing bodybuilder that never managed to bag an Olympia is Flex Wheeler. Let's hear Dorian Yates' opinion on why Flex Wheeler never managed to beat him. Dorian Yates versus Flex Wheeler. Dorian Yates, also known as The Shadow, is considered one of the greatest bodybuilders in modern history, holding 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles. Growing up in England, his troubled youth started after the death of his father. With little guidance, a 19-year-old Yates found himself in a youth detention center where his strength impressed many. Watching other great bodybuilders like Lee Haney inspired Yates to join them on the list of the best ever, and with extreme attention to detail and the utmost dedication, Yates began training. Soon enough, he began winning. The 90s saw a major shift in competitive bodybuilding. During that shift, we saw the emergence of the mass monster, namely the 6-time Olympia champion Dorian Yates. Yates was the first mass monster to dominate the bodybuilding world. He was a massive figure during his heyday and turned back every challenge that came his way after winning his first Olympia championship in 1992. While he dominated 90s bodybuilding, he had many talented challengers. One was Flex Wheeler, who gave Yates all he could handle. For many, Flex Wheeler, despite never winning an Olympia title, is the best bodybuilder that ever lived. But his ranking in the all-time great category cannot be disputed, as he had a unique look that we hadn't seen before and haven't seen since he departed the competitive stage in 2003. In addition, he was one of the most enigmatic and mercurial bodybuilders ever, sort of the Kai Green of his era, without the braids, standing on head poses, and tearful chain fence outpourings. Outside of the gym, Flex has been a practitioner of martial arts since his 20s. Practicing a hybrid style of Taekwondo and Kempo, he focused his competitive nature on fights following his retirement from bodybuilding. So why did Flex Wheeler never manage to overthrow Dorian Yates? Why Flex Wheeler never beat Dorian Yates? Dorian Yates dominated bodybuilding in the 1990s. Some training philosophies and particulars set him apart and propelled his rule. Unlike any other sport on the planet, bodybuilding is a game that requires tremendous diligence and pinpoints accuracy in the areas of dieting, training, personal presentation, and mental tenacity for the express purpose of conveying, as an end goal, the most impressively muscular, ripped-to-shreds physique possible. Given bodybuilding could be considered as much a science as it is a blood-and-guts, balls-to-the-wall pursuit for physical excellence, it is not surprising that it has attracted many who, through meticulous planning, analyzing, and theorizing, have pioneered specific approaches to building muscle and stripping body fat. Dorian was a thinking man's bodybuilder. Having read all available literature on training, nutrition, and psychology as it pertains to performance improvement, the man variously described in bodybuilding circles as the Shadow, partly for his ability to come from nowhere to overwhelm his opposition, and the Beast from Britain, based on his savage approach to training, tenacity, and killer instinct in the gym, had sifted through screeds of information before adopting an approach that would take him to the top. Yates dominated the sport from 1992 to 1997 and ushered in what we know now as the mass monster era. He was lean, muscular, and fierce in his training. Yates' active career was defined by a self-professed monkish existence dedicated to being the biggest, most muscular man on the planet. For those 6 glorious years, the Shadow achieved just that. His combination of size and conditioning was never seen before, and it was an astonishing sight. Yates' training set him apart from others before his 1992 Olympia win began to adopt HIIT principles and trained with Mike Mentzer at Gold's Gym. A clear fan of HIIT, Yates took Mentzer's advice regarding both training intensity and the number of sets needed for growth. Initially, for Yates, this meant 1 set to absolute failure, which in time he raised to several warm-up sets and then 1 to 2 sets to absolute failure. Yates believes that Wheeler never put in the same amount of effort as him, and if he did, he would have been a significant obstacle in his way to winning the Olympia. But other than training, Dorian believes another major reason why Flex could never beat him was the fact that Dorian had the confidence of a winner. Dorian Yates once said, "The mind is key to everything. Whatever you do physically is determined by your mindset."
I did everything, and I achieved 100%. I would say that Flex probably maybe did 70%. Probably Flex had more natural talent than me.
Would his 100 have beaten you?
Very possibly. Quite easy to him do that 100% because it's already there, right?
Dorian Yates on when Flex Wheeler could have beaten him. In an interview, Dorian Yates recounted the 1994 Mr. Olympia, where he felt that Flex Wheeler could have won if he were able to compete. When you think back on the legacy of Dorian Yates, it is hard to imagine anyone getting the upper hand on him during his prime. However, he says that there is one person who could have surpassed him on the right day. At the peak of his career, Yates was almost unstoppable. He took on the best of the best during his reign of 5 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles, before walking away without losing his title. When he finally called it a career in 1997, there was nobody who had gotten the better of Dorian for a very long time. It left many wondering what would have happened had he continued to compete instead of ending his career while on top. However, there was one person who almost got the better of Dorian Yates. Speaking in an interview, the bodybuilding legend was asked about who could have had the potential to beat him while he was reigning as champion. For the most part, he says nobody could have touched him, but there was one name that stuck out. In 1994, Dorian felt like he was not at his best physique and that Flex Wheeler could have beaten him if he were able to compete that year. From there, Dorian Yates was asked a hypothetical question. If he were not competing at the time that he was a champ and was instead coaching one of the other top bodybuilders of the time, who would have been most successful? To him, that honor again went to Flex Wheeler. Dorian felt that Flex's training ethic was not always the best and that he could have done well to help Wheeler find even more success. It is clear to see that Dorian Yates has a lot of respect for Flex Wheeler and the physique that he brought to the stage. It does make you wonder what could have been between these two, especially in 1994. Why didn't Flex Wheeler compete in 1994? With a nickname like the Sultan of Symmetry, Flex Wheeler's legacy as a professional bodybuilder is defined by success and unpredictable injury. Winning the Arnold Classic 4 times, 1993, 97, 98, and 2000, the Sandow eluded him, losing out in 1993 to Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman for subsequent victories. Following his second-place finish in 1993, Flex was involved in a near-fatal car accident that almost left him paralyzed. The resulting injuries, including breaks to his C4 and C5 vertebrae and numerous other bones in his body, and subsequent depression, prevented him from competing in the 1994 Olympia. Nevertheless, Flex recovered from the car accident and returned to the top tiers of bodybuilding in an awe-inspiring amount of time, returning to the stage to win the 1995 Ironman Pro and place a respectable second in that year's Arnold Classic. His career continued with numerous first-place trophies and several Olympia podium finishes, aside from the 1997 Olympia, where Flex was unable to compete due to injuries sustained whilst fighting off would-be carjackers. Arguably, he reached his peak in his post-1995 career, a formidable icon for the sport and undoubtedly one of the best of all time. A significant feat despite being unable to dethrone Ronnie Coleman. Flex retirement and comeback. Flex announced his retirement in 2000 due to hereditary kidney disease, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, but continued competing until 2003 when he received a transplant. His condition was exacerbated by his reluctance to stop competing. Despite his retirement, Wheeler remained vocal in the sport, offering to coach and regularly appearing as the frontman for various nutrition companies. The Sultan briefly returned to compete in the 2017 Olympia Classic Physique division, finishing in 15th place. In October 2019, Flex underwent amputation of his right leg below the knee due to circulatory vascular system problems. Wheeler said the decision to amputate was due to escalating circulation difficulties in my right leg that had become life-threatening. Flex's positive attitude has already seen him return to the gym. That's all for today's video, folks. See you next time.